Welcome to a football show Thursday edition. Nick Suss of the Tennessean. Pay for good journalism at Nick Suss and, of course, Tennessean.com. You can get to me at Braden Gall on the Twitter machine. I am still in the sewers, Nick. I still enjoy it there. It's football season. I need some place to talk about random college and pro football games with people I've never met before. How are you?
I am good. We've met, so this might be a little off-putting to you to have to talk about football with somebody who you have met. But yeah, I'm also still on Twitter at Nick Suss, and you can follow me if you want like 6 tweets a week.
I like that. I think that's actually a good ratio. A tweet a day and then a day off. I think that's good.
Right.
No, look, you and I are talking face to face. That's different. That's human interaction, sort of, in a digital forum, of course. But I don't want face to face human interaction when I start tweeting about Iowa State. You know what I mean? Like, I just want random Iowa State people to talk to me about that stuff, or Vikings fans, or whatever it might be. So look, I still think microblogging is fun. I still think the product is good. I just think the person running it is making stupid decisions. Anyway, that's a topic for another show. We are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages, and we've got a lot to talk about today as the Titans will play Monday night against Miami, back to the scene of the crime where Will Levis sort of captivated everyone's imagination with his ability to lead the team on a big major fourth quarter comeback. And we'll discuss what maybe fans, media, coaching staff, Will Levis could learn from that game, that quarter, and also the Atlanta game in terms of what went well last year. I went back and watched every throw in the Atlanta game. Yes, I did that for you, and so I've got some thoughts, and we'll discuss that. Nick, you were doing some research on this potential matchup, and there's some really bizarro quarterback statistics we'll discuss about this coming up. What adjustments does Denard Wilson need to make? And some O-line stuff as well. What's going on with the offensive line? Do we expect any changes there? And some power rankings that caught your eye over the week. We'll get to that. So Sinkers Beverages first before we do, however. If you need a beverage while watching the Titans on Monday night, don't get in the car and go get one. Just search Uber Eats and search Sinkers Beverages and have them deliver the booze directly to your house. I don't know if you're going to need to drink on Monday night. I know you might have an extra soda or two. I don't know, Nick, because I know you're not a big weeknight drinker.
I don't think they're going to have beer in the Miami press box.
No.
But I could probably find a suite that is willing to give me something.
It depends on how the game's going, right? Like if Will Levis actually plays well and the offensive line is blocking and a third string quarterback from Miami can't score points, maybe they don't want to share. We'll see. Sinkers Beverages always shares. That's the point, is what I'm getting at here. So go to Sinkers Beverages, 3-time liquor store of the year. Search on Uber Eats for them. They'll deliver the booze directly to your house. They will drive so that you can drink. And we just don't know how this season's going to unfold. And so you may need more and more booze as the season goes along. But over almost 40 years of service in East Nashville, and Bluegrass Beverages, their sister store in Hendersonville, over 50 years of service. So they are good locally owned businesses. Go support them. This is a locally owned business. You're living locally. Go support them. That's the way to do this in the community. Keep it in the community, Nick, as they say. All right, before we get to any of that, I'm just curious, after talking to the coach on Monday and then the coach again on Wednesday and Will Levis on Wednesday, certainly there was some interesting sort of self-reflective moments, it seemed like, from Will Levis. I think it was one of your questions about sort of processing the negativity or processing the difficulty or the adversity that's come with the first 3 weeks of the season. Do you feel any differently about the Packers game, about the 0-3 start, about Will Levis? Has anything changed in your mind over the last few days now that the game is 4 days away from us in the past?
One of my big mantras about football is don't get mad about the things you thought were going to happen. And so, like, I picked this team to start 0-3 back in May, and I've stuck with it since then. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh my gosh, how dare they do the thing I thought they would do? Like, this was always going to be a work in progress. So I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I'm out on this team, or this team's not where it should be, or I need to reevaluate it. This was a tough 3 weeks. Obviously, things change based on Jordan Love not playing, and that was a tough one to swallow, and we can talk a lot about that. But I don't know. I think that I'm looking at a team that is still trying to be more than a collection of talent. And there's talent here. There's no doubt that there are players on this team that I trust to make plays. But I haven't seen the congealance yet of all of that talent. I make up 3 words a day. Don't worry.
The gelling.
Yeah. I didn't want to say that. That sounds too normal. I had to say something really dumb.
Really?
I don't know. I listen to what the players are saying, and there's no part of me that thinks they have lost the faith. Now, could that change at 0-4? Could that change at 1-5? If they continue to struggle, you're going to have a tricky situation. But this early in the season, this early in a coaching staff trying to figure itself out, I'm not overly concerned.
Well, which is why my answer to the question, like, is the season on the line for the Titans? Like, no, the answer is no, because you had them at 6 wins, I had them at 7. And so basically, and I would argue we were probably, some of the only people in the Titans press corps that were sort of putting it in that ballpark. But I did have a moment before the season started where I was on this show, and I think I want to say it was maybe Easton that was hosting with me, and I said the thing that keeps circling in the back of my mind is that maybe this team is worse than even I think at 7 wins. And certainly, you tweeted this out, which is funny because you're looking at a bunch of power rankings around the NFL after 3 weeks, which is largely irrelevant to what this team is or is going to be. But they're basically ranked dead last by everybody. I don't think this is the worst team in the NFL. But that thought in the back of my head about 2 weeks out from the start of the season was, man, is this actually a team that's going to be picking in the top 3 in the draft? And nothing I have seen so far has at least disproved that part of this. But to your point, if I didn't expect them to do much more than 7 wins, and this was always going to be a learning season, I can't really put that much gravity into the actual outcome of a Monday night game against Miami. If it happens really in ugly fashion again, and Levis continues to make bad mistakes, and the offensive line can't block, and a third-string quarterback goes out there and plays very well, it does push this team closer into top 2 or 3 draft pick status than even I expected in the preseason.
Yeah, and it's funny you talk about that initial impression 2 weeks out from the season. I had the inverse, where I was looking at everybody else's predictions, and I think I was the low man. I think 6 was about the lowest anyone went. Yeah. And I was like, oh gosh, am I seeing this wrong? Everybody else is seeing an 8, 9, 10 win team. What am I? And so
I was following you off the cliff. I was following you off the cliff. I was like, oh, look at this Nick guy. He's got 6 wins. That's the way I'm going.
And like, I feel obviously they could, in a perfect world, go 14-3. Like, the NFL is a strange game. We all know it's an 8-point league. Nothing would surprise me if the Titans went up to Detroit and played well, went up to Buffalo and played well. These are all professionals. Teams are not as far apart in this league as we make them out to be. But if you talk about the tiers of this league, the Titans are in the same tier right now as the Raiders, as the Patriots, as the Giants, as the Jaguars you can probably put in there, the Browns you can probably put in there. And these are all teams with either bad quarterbacks or underperforming quarterbacks. And right now the Titans are trying to determine which of the two they have.
Chef Rand says, worst quarterback, worst team. He is not even the worst quarterback on Monday night in the game. I totally disagree. Again, with Mac Jones in the lineup, Jacksonville is a worse football team. I'm sorry. I think they could be a worse football team. They've got some nice pieces, much like the Titans. Really nice defensive player, a couple of defensive linemen, a nice linebacker, a good receiver or two, nice running back. But like otherwise, they're with Mac Jones, I would take the Titans as a better football team. So I don't think they are the worst team. They may have had the worst start to the season, and I agree with you. This is the league. Everything is basically even, and anything could happen. So I don't know. I'm interested. We'll see what happens. I just think calling them the worst team, if you want to caveat that with sort of like this has been the worst start relative to maybe to expectations, I'm okay with that. I do not think they are the 32nd best roster in the NFL. I think this is youth and experience, lack of congealing amalgamation. I'm trying to add more words to your word there. I like amalgamation. That's a good one.
It's funny to me. I think that there's a difference between being bad and being high profile bad. And the Titans have put on a clinic in that. Like, there are teams that are playing worse than the Titans in a less noticeable way. But the Titans' mistakes have been if the not top 10 still existed, the Titans would be all over the not top 10. And I think it's easier to put that team in the 32 spot than it is a team like the Browns, who are just miserable right now.
Well, and let's go with the not top 10 for the team itself. Like, at the end of the season, if the not top 10 for the Tennessee Titans includes, like, I would argue that at least 5 or 6 plays of the top 10 should already be filled. Like two, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so meaning if you're getting it all out of the way now, and you're going to have a couple of more moments like this, but ultimately 2 block punts, the bouquet toss to the sideline, and the other bouquet toss, and then the pick 6. Like, you should be at basically 5 right. Of your worst plays of the season should have already happened. So in theory, if that happens, that means they make progress and they get a little bit better. But I don't think I don't think that there's some overwhelming judgment coming on Monday night. I agree that it's the high-profile nature of the mistakes that are sort of like my 7-year-old is like, what are they doing? You know what I mean? Like, if the 7-year-old knows that's an egregious error of mental capacity, that's where you sort of have to make some mistakes. Andrew says the season is definitely not on the line. It's already over.
Guys, go ahead.
No, you're up.
I will say, if you guys want to feed into the negativity, I can tell you the stat I'm sitting on. Do you want to get into the research?
Ooh, let's do it.
Okay. So I spent about 3.5 hours on Monday looking this up. It was very tedious. I looked at every single instance since the year 2000 where a team had a first-year head coach and had a quarterback who was 25 or younger start the first 3 games of the season.
Okay. First-year head coach since 2000, quarterback 25 or younger, first 3 games.
There are, counting this year, 50 or 51 instances of this happening.
You did all that research and don't know the number?
I can't remember if I counted this year's Commanders or not. This year's, I can't remember if I double counted them. But if we're taking out this year's Titans and this year's Commanders, it's definitely 49. 49 instances. There are 6 times, not counting this year's Titans, that the team has started 0-3. Those other 6 coach-quarterback combinations: Dennis Green and Josh McCown in Arizona in 2004, Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence, Robert Saleh and Zach Wilson, Joe Judge and Daniel Jones. Who were the other 2? It's a very bad group.
Yeah. Yes,
none of those 6 coaches ever took. Oh, I'm not to Chef Rand's point. I'm not saying first time head coach. I'm saying first year head coach. So in this instance,
you said that.
Yeah. So just to the comment there, I'm not talking about it was his first ever time being a coach, just first year with a franchise. There are 6 instances of it happening where they started 0-3. Those 6 coaches never led their team to a playoff berth. And the 6 quarterbacks, the only one who has ever led their team to a playoff berth. I believe Daniel Jones has 2 and Trevor Lawrence has 1 playoff. 2 playoff games, maybe. So
yeah, because he won. He made that big comeback, I think. 28-0 comeback against the Chargers.
So you look at the inverse, and we'll just say winning record, losing record. 19 instances did a coach-quarterback combination go 3-0 or 2-1 in their first 3 games. 18 of those 19 went on to make the playoffs.
At least once in their career?
Yes.
Okay.
You take the other 30, and it's 10 out of 30 made the playoffs at some point.
So a 1-2 start, essentially, is what you're saying.
A 1-2 or 0-3 start, you are about 1/3 chance of making the playoffs historically. If you start 2-1 or 3-0, roughly a 95% chance of ever making the playoffs at some point in your tenure.
Can I spin this in a positive way first?
Of course.
Before we go further into the negativity, the positive of this to me is that you're at a 60, like only 40% of them even had a winning record. So 60% of the time it works every time. No, 60% of the time you're not going to have a winning record, which is to be expected with a young quarterback and a coach in his first season on the team. Now, I do think it's interesting, the Commanders, just because they're fresh in our minds, it is interesting to have a guy who's like been to a Super Bowl as a head coach and then gets a number 2 overall pick. Now, it's even crazier because he's in his first season as a quarterback, but that's very different than Brian Callahan and Will Levis, who is neither of whom have had a full season in their roles at any point during the start of this season. So, continue to go negative. I'm just going to I'm going to try to shade that a little bit with a little bit of positivity, but it's hard to do.
There's no sense in calling it negative. What it is you can look at this as 50 coaches, 20. What does this equal out to? 28 of them, so a little over half, made the playoffs at some point, but 2/3 of those started 2-1 or 3-0. Like, the ones who had the best records are Mike Tomlin, Marty Schottenheimer, Rex Ryan, who had those awesome starts with the Jets those years. Doug Peterson, when he was in Philly, ended up winning a Super Bowl. Like, usually these first 3 games, I was surprised by just how much you can tell about this team or this trend. I thought it was going to be, it's 50-50. It's a mash of spaghetti. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. But there really is a bit of a dividing line there, and the Titans are on the wrong side of that history right now.
Well, and just sort of like as storytellers in the press, I find it interesting that a lot of our messaging, and I think it's accurate, a lot of our messaging should be about patience and about time, with a defensive coordinator who's never called plays, an offensive coordinator who's never called plays or been a head coach, a quarterback who's never had a full season under his belt, an offensive line filled with all second and third year players minus Lloyd Cushenberry, like receivers that have never, haven't worked together with the quarterback or in the system. Hopkins has been hurt. Like, we can go down the list of things that sort of say, all right, logically, this should be a patient team and a patient fan base.
Absolutely.
And then at the same time, turn around and in our storytelling say, well, it's over. because Josh McCown and Dennis Green 15, 20 years ago weren't a good combination. Saleh and Wilson had to be last year or 2 years ago?
2 or 3. It was the same year as Meyer and Lawrence.
Okay. And then you said Joe Judge and Daniel Jones, of course. And then I didn't hear the other 2, so I don't know if you got the other 2.
Let me pull up the story real quick. I have written it down, and I should have had it up already, but I'm always 2 clicks away. Here we go. The 2 I missed: Frank Reich and Bryce Young last year. Eric Mangini and Brady Quinn with the 2009 Browns.
Oh my God, these are. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, I think, could actually be a decent quarterback, but these are bad quarterbacks. I mean, Bryce Young, I guess, could end up. He's pretty early in his career. We don't want to bury him yet, but that's a pretty telling list of guys that Will Levis and Brian Callahan are now with.
And the thing about the list is you go up and down, and you don't know if you want to look at the quarterbacks or the coaches more. Like, do you want to say, it was Josh McCown and Brady Quinn? Like, we know what that was. Or do we want to look at it as, it was a doomed Frank Reich tenure and a doomed Joe Judge tenure? Like, it's usually when you start 0-3, bad things happen. And sorry to be super obvious and reductive here, but it's not good to be 0-3.
Look, it's early in the morning. Reductive is okay. Urban Meyer's a terrible NFL coach. That's on him. I think that's almost exclusively on him. He's completely insane as a head coach in the NFL. So there you go. Well, that's interesting stuff, man. Make sure you go check out the entire piece over there at Tennessean, Tennessean.com. Eddie says, if the point of the season is to make the playoffs, then the season is over. If the point of the season is to watch shit football, then the season's still on. I like that, Eddie. Don't lose your sense of humor, guys, about this stuff. Look, this is an incredibly difficult thing to ask fans to do, which is to study the trajectory and the progress and not the output, the wins and losses. It's a very hard thing to do for fans, especially in the NFL where, it's a meritocracy. All the teams are roughly even and crazy stuff happens all the time. Look, you mentioned how crazy stuff happens. I mean, the Miami game last year, they were 4-8 and had not won a road game all season, and beat a 9-3 team that had Tua under center, and went down there and won the game. Now, we'll get to this in a second because I think there is some interesting stuff to be taken from the Atlanta game last year and the second half of the Miami game, which I watched all the fourth quarter of the Miami game and I watched all the Atlanta game because I was like, what did he do well in those games? What was right about Levis and the offense in those situations that led to such a different looking player? I mean, you watch the Atlanta game and he's a different player. He's so confident. It's first game. I get it. But it's just a different looking player. So we'll get to that coming up in just a second. So Sinkers Beverages, of course, if you hear those statistics and need a beverage, I understand. Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville. Sign up for the in-crowd. Follow them on the socials. You'll get access to all kinds of allocation, It's like double super secret probation drops of bourbon, all kinds of cool stuff. So make sure you sign up for the In Crowd and go check out the store and follow them on the socials. Okay. Here's a number that Brian Callahan did not say which offensive tackle is going to play at right tackle. Peter Skoronski yesterday in the locker room was basically like, I'm a guard, which I thought was funny because the internet likes to run wild with rumors and sort of just their own thoughts. The offensive line adjustments. He did say yesterday to you guys that you can game plan around a bad tackle. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. And I want to throw out a number to you that probably isn't going to make Titans fans happy. Geno Smith, Seattle. They're 3-0, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's his fastest time to throw of his career so far, and he is number 3 in the NFL in pressure rate. 19.6% of his dropbacks, he is getting pressured, which means he's getting pressured as much as Will Levis or anyone else on the planet. But he has adapted not only through his own quickness with processing and decision making. He is now adjusting and throwing it faster than ever, but they're also winning. And a lot of it's the defense and some of it's the matchups, and I get all of that. But that's an example of a quarterback and a staff that has made adjustments to a weakness, which is the offensive line. What do we see here from the Titans and Levis from this standpoint? Because you can't just make J.C. Latham a fourth-year player and Peter Skoronski a fifth-year player. You can't just wave a wand and add a right tackle who's going to block every time. You got to figure out how to adjust here.
Well, I will begin with the caveat of saying I don't know. Like I wish I knew how to fix a football team. I would probably be working for a football team if that were the case. But you can scheme around a bad player. They just haven't. Like we can agree. Yes, you can scheme around a hole on the offensive line, but it's been 2.5 years of this, and the Titans haven't figured out how to do it yet. And this is a new regime. I'm not blaming them for the last 2 years, but I don't know. You get the ball out quicker, you move the pocket, you play more horizontal, you get the run game involved, you start playing with a lead, you start playing more ball control offense. There's a lot of things you can do. It's just what's going to work for this team. Is it going to make more sense? I was thinking about this Monday. Is it going to make more sense for Levis to be more involved in rollouts to kind of get away from where the pressure is? But we saw that on that 4th down in the 3rd quarter. He got out of the pocket and didn't get rid of the ball. Is it going to make more sense to try more of the screen game? Yeah, they've had a little bit of success on screens this year, but they've also had to dirt quite a few screens this year because they didn't develop. Is the plan then try and play a little more ball control, play a little more downhill like they did in the first half against Chicago? Yeah, you can try that, but then you can run into the situations you did against Green Bay where they take away the run and you become one-dimensional. Like, there are answers. And this is not me saying, oh, it's hopeless. It's just in order for the answers to work, you have to play really good football. And the Titans need to get to a point where they can play really good football in spite of their weaknesses or not have weaknesses. And since they're probably not going to go trade for a right tackle right now, they got to figure out a way to play in spite of it.
Who are they good enough to develop? Like, they're obviously not good enough in the last 3 games to do that, but are they good enough to develop into those players that can play around the weaknesses and play? Because again, I guess we can get into this because I when I went back and watched, I tried to jot down some sort of like common themes in the 2 moments where Will Levis sort of shined and felt great. Now, there's certainly an element of the Miami game where you have to understand game context and that they're down 2 touchdowns and that Miami's playing a little soft and that they're going to allow some things to happen. DeAndre Hopkins is number 1. When you look at the two moments in the 2 games, he didn't force the football to DeAndre Hopkins, but DeAndre Hopkins was the focal point. And when they started going against Green Bay down by a lot of points, DeAndre Hopkins became the focal point again. And that's number 1. Number 2 is play action crossing routes. They've got to get they had some deep Chigakonko wide open on a deep crossing route that he actually dropped, I think, in the Atlanta game. These deep sort of digs and these deep crossing routes that are about that 10 to 12 to 15 yards down the field. Some of them are even further. A lot of play action against Atlanta, a lot of play action against Miami. And honestly, and Levis talked about it yesterday, the other element is getting into the 2-minute style of no thinking, the no thinking offense where you're just sort of going and going and going and you're just playing ball. And a lot of play action, a lot of crossing routes, a lot of shots to Hopkins to keep people honest. and a lot of screens, to your point of slowing people down. So I don't know if that means they can do that this week against Miami, but the things that I noticed going back, and unfortunately my other takeaway from watching that was like they still were only up by 5 against Atlanta in the fourth quarter with like 7 minutes to go. And yes, I know that Atlanta was pretty banged up in that game. I think Jesse Bates was healthy and played, who's probably their best player in the secondary. And that Miami, like, again, wasn't like they needed 2 touchdown drives in the fourth quarter, a 2-point conversion, and a great defensive series from their defense, 2 series in a row to even come close to winning that game. But most importantly, I saw a player playing with fun, energy, and confidence. That was what I saw. I saw a guy who liked get the game, and he was having fun. And I don't know how to get back to that player. That's the player that needs to come back. And what he said yesterday, Nick, was not. I'm not going to say it's concerning, but it's clear that all this stuff is weighing on him, the quarterback.
One of the most telling things I heard yesterday was Callahan talking about Levis's energy. And one of the things Callahan said is, we like to see Will use that energy. We want to see him celebrate. We want to see him be excited. But most of the great quarterbacks I've ever been around have a calm to them.
You want the direct quote? He called it, quote, a certain calmness.
A certain calmness. Mm-hmm. And that was not Callahan saying Will does not have that. He went on to say that he really likes the way that Will is calm and thought out and collected on the sideline after drives. But it's not a square peg in a round hole. It's a square peg into like a square hole with rounded edges. Like he's almost the right fit. And I think they're trying to figure out, well, do we need to change the peg or do we need to change the hole? And they are figuring it out. They're getting there, but it's still that process of figuring out what a Will Levis quarterbacked offense looks like in a Brian Callahan scheme and what a Brian Callahan scheme looks like with Will Levis at quarterback. I think they're getting closer, but you're right. The thing that absolutely needs to happen is figure out, how does Will do the things he does where he's spinning around and he's making these crazy throws, these ill-advised throws because he knows he can, while he's not doing the bouquet toss, to your term. Like, you have to reconcile that the bouquet toss is a symptom of the fact that he's also the guy who had that like crazy scramble into the red zone against the Jets of just like, I got to make a play happen. These are the same symptom. And so how do you harness the good of that without being crushed by the bad of that?
Yeah.
That's a tough job.
So I was watching the highlights or like the reaction to the Miami game. This is also how twisted I was diving into all this. I was watching like Good Morning Football's like recap of the game, like the following morning of the Miami game last year. And one of the things that I think it was Kyle Brand, I can't remember. He basically said, Will Levis is Jameis-like. He has Jameis-like potential. And I first was like, oh, damn, that's bad. He goes, no, that you cannot take your eyes off of him no matter what's happening, good or bad. And I think that's appropriate. I think that's exactly where he's at right now, because when it does click, it's very fun. It can be very entertaining because he's got a lot of Favre to his game. And what made Green Bay weird, hang on, I just want to what made Green Bay, I think it was the time and era that Brett Favre played that allowed him to do the things he did, which is all the mistakes, all the interceptions, all the crazy underhand stuff, the stuff that made him Brett Favre. It was a weird time. We have now like Aaron Rodgers, the entire NFL, where efficiency is the most important thing. Protecting the football is the most important thing. We don't play that game anymore. And Will Levis, it's almost like Will Levis would have been perfect in like 1997 football, because he's big, he's physical, and he's willing to take risks and have fun and play like a gladiator. And I don't know if I think there's space for that. I mean, Josh Allen's doing it right now for Buffalo. So I don't think it's like it needs to be removed from the game. You just got to figure out how to win games with playing that style. I don't know. I don't want to change. You cannot change the player. I don't think you can change the player.
To your point, though, about efficiency and the change of the game, quick little trivia. Top 50 quarterbacks in NFL history by completion percentage in their career. How many of them never took a snap after Y2K?
Not very many. It's got to be Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger, like a bunch of all those guys. I'm saying, okay, Peyton Manning. Tom Brady.
So never took a snap after Y2K. So I'm looking for the guys.
After. Right. Okay, so only before. Dan Marino. Did he take a snap after 2000?
I
don't
think
think
his
so.
last year was 99.
Okay. Dan Marino's not a top 50 completion percentage guy?
Not top 50 all-time by completion percentage.
Okay, is it 0?
It's 2. It's Steve Young and Joe Montana.
Okay,
They're the only ones on the list. And if you
sense.
go by passer rating, I think it might be 3. Like the efficiency of quarterbacks, where you're looking at Dan Marino being roughly tied with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like quarterback play has changed fundamentally. And you talk about, Levis is a throwback. Yeah, he's a throwback to an era where quarterbacks were worse at doing the things that we value as football fans. They were better at doing things that we value as people who enjoy watching football because it's really friggin' fun. But
and people that don't care about concussions. We didn't care about concussions back then either.
It's like, I think number 1 all time in completion percentage right now is Joe Burrow. And
tracks.
For all of his great deep balls to Jamar Chase, his completion percentage is so high because he throws a lot of checkdowns when they're not there. And that's the offense that Levis is trying to learn right now. Yeah. It's tricky.
And that's the other thing I noticed about the Atlanta game is they would go short pass, play action, short pass, crossing route, deep shot. And it wasn't in that order, but ratio wise, you were looking at, they took a lot of shots in that game, and they took shots in the Dolphins game. They have to take, if Hopkins is healthy, they've got to go back to forcing him the football down the field, because if nothing else, it will force folks to respect him. Levis also made 3 unbelievable throws that ended up, he was 0 for 3 on the passes in the Atlanta game. 2 of them were to Burks. They were exceptional throws to Treylon Burks down the sideline, and Burks dropped one that was right in his lap, and the other one he couldn't get his feet down on the sideline. The other one was to Chig on a drop pass. So he could have had an even bigger game in that Atlanta game. And so I do think that a lot, to your point about sort of massaging the offense, filling in the holes, the edges of the peg there that you're talking about, to continue the very strange kid's toy analogy. I think that's where you can, all right, more crossing routes, more play action, more deep shots. What do you have to lose at this point? Lean into some of the things that he does well and build some of his confidence, because one deep shot to Calvin Ridley against the Jets changed the entire feeling of that building. Mm-hmm. And let the guy who gets paid $90 million go make a big play. I don't know.
I agree. And small fact check, Andrew Sheffran, the West Coast offense has existed since the late 70s. This is not the West Coast offense. Brett Favre played in the West Coast offense, and he's the example.
I think they're talking about Montana and Bill Walsh changing being the impetus to changing the efficiency of the game.
Sure. And that is fair. Fair.
That's what I read from you commenters, Andrew and Sheffran. Okay,
read the book, Blood, Sweat, and Chalk. It's fantastic. Great history of offensive play calling.
That's Walsh, right? That's Walsh's book?
I think it's some. I have it on my bookshelf. I can look later.
Okay. Sinkers Beverages, of course, as well. Remember them as you are celebrating watching football this weekend. We got Bama, Georgia this weekend. Going to be a great game. You don't have to have a take about the Bama, Georgia game. That's my advice. We'll talk about it coming up in just a second. And obviously, search Uber Eats for Sinkers Beverages. Have the booze delivered directly to your house. Don't drink and drive, of course. That's stupid. That's bad. That's a bouquet toss of a decision. So make sure you search Uber Eats for Sinkers Beverages. Have the booze delivered directly to your house, to your tailgate, to your watch party, whatever it is you're doing this weekend, Saturday or Sunday or Monday. Sinkers Beverages is your spot. Locally owned and operated, serving the Nashville community for almost 40 years. Okay, quickly before we get let's wrap up the bizarre quarterback matchup here, because I know you were tweeting out about Connecticut. Here's the question: Will Levis went to Xavier High School. So did Tim Boyle, which is crazy. Jeff Bagwell, proud alumni of Xavier High School, former Houston Astros first baseman. Nobody watching this show knows who Mike Oresco is. You and I do. So those are some alumni there. What is give me the improbable nature of 2 quarterbacks from the same high school in Connecticut starting on a Monday night in the NFL?
There are 6 quarterbacks in NFL history who went to high school in Connecticut and started a game in the NFL. It's 6 ever. Boyle and Levis are the only 2 who attended the same high school period. So it's 5 high schools, 6 quarterbacks. they will, if Tim Boyle starts, be the first Connecticuters to ever start against each other as quarterbacks in the NFL game. Wildly, to have played against each other, because Steve Young started, and I am blanking on the other guy's name who came off the bench, but it was a game in 1997.
Like Phil Cox or something?
Yeah, Phil Cox.
Phil Cox.
And then the other two were Dan Orlovsky is from Connecticut. And there is a guy who started one game in 1987, who I am, or Acacio or something like that. It is unlikely that two people from the same Connecticut high school would start an NFL game. That's something you could believe of like Midland in Texas or something. Yeah. This is that is not a hotbed for NFL talent. And here we are. Maybe it happens. Maybe it's Skylar Thompson. Maybe it's Tyler Huntley, whoever it ends up being. But for the sake of Titans fans, you want it to be Tim Boyle. That's a dude who has not thrived in the NFL.
Like Valdosta High School, Tampa Plant High School. Like, there's a lot of high schools I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. You got all kinds of big St. Thomas Aquinas, South Lake Carroll. Like, there's lots of them that I would say that makes sense. Xavier High School in Middleton, Connecticut, not really a hotbed of quarterbacking talent. It's pretty funny though. It's pretty funny. So ultimately, let's go to the other side of the ball quickly here, and we'll talk a little college football to wrap up. But I'm curious, what is on the defense here? Like how they've got difficult players to deal with. Tyreek Hill and Devin Achane, these guys really stress your defense in a lot of crazy ways. How much can the quarterback actually execute and make those plays? We don't really know. They've got to take the football away. They've got to pressure the quarterback. They haven't done a lot of that. You still have some really good players in Landry and Simmons and Sweat. You got two linebackers that appear to be developing into one of the strengths of the team with Murray and Jones in the middle there. The corner depth is like Awuzie is not officially on IR, but he's going to go on IR probably and going to miss some time if he doesn't. One of the things we talked about, Nick, before the season is that they don't have a ton of depth. And while Jarvis Brownlee, I think, is going to be a nice player and is going to step in and I think play admirably with Snead and McCreary at corner, they can't afford too many more of these starting pieces to be hurt. And it's very tenuous, the starting lineup is. So depth question, and then how do you maximize the Sweat, Landry, Simmons, Jones, Murray group in the middle? How do you take that and maximize what they're doing on defense?
You know what I find really interesting about this defense? Something that I noticed after the Packers game that I don't think we're talking about enough as a source of what's going wrong with the Titans. Average starting field position for Titans opponents this year is the 34-yard line. Like, between the turnovers and the touchbacks and the bad special teams play, like, this defense is not starting off favorably. I think that's somewhere to start. Of like, obviously the defense can't control the field position, but if we want to talk about complementary football to give you guys flashbacks to a previous era, that's a good place to start. If you want to start forcing turnovers, back the opponents up. If you want to start making those big plays, the opponents are too comfortable right now. They're starting from a place where they can do just about whatever they want. They have their entire offense at their disposal. And that makes it really tough to use Sweat and Simmons to push the pocket. It makes it really tough to let Ernest Jones play sideline to sideline. It makes it tough to have Snead up and pressing and burying Tyreek Hill in the dirt. Like, I don't know. I think the defense has honestly played better than I thought it would to start the season. I thought if they were 0-3, it would be because the defense is not helping very much in high-scoring games. Not that the offense wasn't helping in low-scoring games. So, I don't know. I want to see that depth develop. I want to see whether that's Jarvis Brownlee or Darrell Baker or Julius Wood, or maybe you call up Trey Avery or Gabe Judy Lawley from the practice squad if you like. But I want to see that cornerback depth develop. I want to see the pass rush actually get home, which that side opposite Harold Landry is a bit of a mess right now. And I don't know if that's Arden who needs to improve. I don't know if that's Jalen Harrell who needs to improve. Jalen Harrell, for as much as we talked about him in the preseason, has not looked superb to start the season. He's still a guy who was the 6th to last pick in the NFL draft. He's got some time to develop. So I don't know, pass rush, cornerback depth, and for the love of God, special teams, try and give your defense something. That would be helpful.
The Miami Dolphins average starting position 15th in the NFL, 30.2 yard line. The Titans, by the way, and I said this, it's funny you said we're not talking about enough about it. I said this on the show Monday with Kaharski. They are 28th in the NFL at starting position on offense, their own 27-yard line. And I think they've started in opposing territory one time this season. I think that was against the Bears after the
Velus Jones,
the mistake on the kickoff. So the defense, they have the makings of something very interesting in the heart of their defense, which is if you're going to be strong somewhere, you want to be good up the middle. It's like baseball, right? You want to be good at catcher and shortstop and center field. You want to be good at defensive tackle, middle linebacker, and safety. That's a good place to build your offense, especially if you have Snead on the outside. They should be able to maximize these players. So this is on Denard Wilson, honestly. Jeffrey Simmons has to take some ownership of this as well. But this is on Denard Wilson for me to come up with stuff that is creative when you have two linebackers that are playing very well behind two big eaters on the defensive line. So I don't know what that means from a speed standpoint, with Hill and A-Chain and those other guys, Waddle. If you're going to get those guys in space, you want to get them out wide. I get it. So it's going to be a tough matchup this weekend. But this needs to be a Denard Wilson game. Like, to me, like, you've got a third string quarterback, do some stuff that confuses him. Like, it should not be hard to win that battle.
And I'm very excited to see a Snead Hill matchup in this Denard defense, because we know what Snead Hill looked like last year in a Spagnuolo defense. How much can the Titans translate that? Because last week with Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle, Tyreek Hill, I think it was 5 targets, 3 catches, 40 yards, all of which would have tied season lows last year. They're going to need to get Tyreek involved. And the Titans have the guy who is most famous for stopping Tyreek Hill. I want to see how that works out. That's going to be, if that's not the matchup of the game, then the matchup of the game ends up being DeAndre Hopkins and Jalen Ramsey, two guys who also famously have a lot of fun going against each other.
No, so, it should be. There's a lot of intrigue in this game for sure. There's no question. So, all right. So here's an interesting question from Tom. Tom, it's not a question, I guess he says, but if you go 0-4, changes are going to have to be made. What do you do after 4 weeks of a season? I don't know what you do.
He has a follow-up. Let's just go ahead and address this, because we're going to have to talk about it every week.
Right. If Levis keeps making mistakes, why play him? Let Rudolph in and play him. He will take care of the ball. You got make sure you get all your words in there. He may not be the franchise quarterback, but he'll buy you time till you find one and progress. Chef Fran says Mason Rudolph. Look, why do you want Mason Rudolph to win a few more games than Will Levis? If Will Levis is terrible, learn and let him play and then get a better draft pick. I'm unsure about that strategy.
The point of being in the NFL is not to make the playoffs, guys. The point of being in the NFL is to win the Super Bowl. And Mason Rudolph has proven he's not going to be a guy who's going to do that. Like, you can get to the playoffs if you started Mason all 17 games this year. I could have seen this team. You could have gone 8-9, 9-8. That's what he does. And that is not an insult. Like, he's good at the same way that we talked all last year of like, oh yeah, the Colts are better with Gardner Minshew than they would be with Anthony Richardson. Yes, they were. They were technically better because they had a more experienced guy who you knew could guide you to some wins. But yeah, I'm not sitting here saying root for losses. I don't want you to root for losses. I want you to root for wins. And I'm happy that you guys are sitting here saying we want to win, so let's put in Mason Rudolph. But also fundamentally, you know what Mason Rudolph is. You don't know what Will Levis is yet. And the unknown is better than the known in the situation where the known commodity is guy who can get you to the playoffs and not much more.
8 to 9, also strangely and ironically, the number of yards he can throw the football down the field. It's just 8 to 9 yards. No, he was more accurate in camp, but he doesn't give you any of the other stuff. He just doesn't. He can process the offense and he can deliver the football where it needs to go, but it doesn't help you win a Super Bowl. To your point.
Hey, look, a segue into college right there.
Yes. We joked about this and Paul actually gave me like 3 minutes to talk about this, that Arch Manning and Nico Iamaleava are going to be the top 2 picks in the 2026 draft, which means Titans fans they're not even talking about the 25 draft. We're already skipping to the 2026 draft, which is the most Tennessee Titans fan thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Go to Seekers Beverages, sign up for good journalism at the Tennessean, of course, Tennessean.com. At Nick Suss on Twitter, you can get to me at Braden Gall as well. Look, how about we touch on Arch and Nico?
Sure.
Tennessee is absolutely a championship contender. That's what I saw for the first time since probably like 2003, 2007, maybe. I saw a Tennessee program mature into adulthood against Oklahoma on Saturday. They decided to win a game with big dad energy. It was we know where we are in the game. We know our defense is going to win us this game. We're going to play it extremely safe. We're going to be risk averse. It's like when you invest as a young player, as a young person, you're investing for the long term. That was Hendon Hooker. That was the transfer portal. That was the Alabama win. Now you're investing like you're getting closer to retirement, and it's playing it a little more risk averse. And they won a game the way I have not seen Tennessee win a game on the road in a hostile environment against a very good defense. I haven't seen it since I was in college in the early 2000s like that. That is a sign of maturity and growth from the program. So that's my take on Tennessee. I don't know if you have anything else. I think this team can beat almost anybody in college football. They may not be better than the top 2 or 3, but they might be the next best team.
This is the greatest compliment I can give Tennessee football. For the last 3 quarters of that game, I have 2 screens. I had my primary screen on Ole Miss Georgia Southern because it was more fun. Tennessee, the team that is known for 65 to 64 shootouts, made a game against the school with every Heisman quarterback you've ever heard of boring. That's incredible. Like,
I agree.
Turning an Oklahoma game, making them give up on a 5-star quarterback is really, really impressive. They are, for my money, the third best team in the SEC. Am I putting them ahead of Alabama? Am I getting cart before the horse yet? I don't know.
We'll find out on Saturday.
We very much will.
I think, and also here's the other thing: Grayson McCall for NC State out for the year, the quarterback. You play quarterback against Tennessee, your season's over. The ripple effect of Tennessee's defensive line it permeates the ACC, the former Big 12, the SEC. It's all there. They get a bye this week, and then they got, I think it's Arkansas and then Florida. Like before they play Bama at home, like it's setting up nicely. And 10-2 gets them into the playoff with their schedule and their performance. So
the bad news for them, Texas also has a bye this week. Oh no, I'm misreading that. That's Mississippi State.
No, Texas. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Arch. Look, this is perfect for Arch Manning. And it's what I don't understand about Billy Napier starting Graham Mertz last week against Mississippi State. I don't understand. If you have a young star quarterback, throw the kitchen sink at him when there's not a lot of pressure to win.
Yeah.
Like they threw the sink at Manning and they said, if you make some mistakes, who cares? They're doing the same thing with Marcel Reed, former Nashville native down at Texas A&M. Let him make mistakes. They're doing the same thing with Nussmeier at LSU. Like if you got a young player who's going to develop, and Arch Manning, there's no pressure against UL Monroe and against Mississippi State, and then he's on bye, and then when the Texas-Oklahoma game is in 2 weeks, it will be back to Quinn Ewers. So now, if they beat Oklahoma and then play Georgia the next week, and they're struggling, that's where they could make the change back to Arch Manning, but that's a story for another day. All right, Bama, Georgia.
Yeah.
Like, here's my first thought on this. This doesn't have to be – you don't need some grand overarching indictment or takeaway on Kalen DeBoer's coaching tenure or Kirby Smart's coaching tenure or Carson Beck or Jalen Milroe or the new playoff structure. You don't need any of that. You can sit back and just enjoy good on good for what should be a spectacular football game between 2 very evenly matched, very physical teams with good defenses, good quarterbacks, good coaching staffs. This doesn't change. Like, people are still going to watch in huge numbers. It's going to draw a huge number. So to suggest that the playoff has taken away value from the regular season is factually untrue. People are going to watch this in ridiculous numbers. Just enjoy it. Learn some stuff. Acquire data. It's one of the best data acquisition moments of the year. But it doesn't need to mean X or Y, big picture, long term, Nick Saban, DeBoer, Smart, championship. It doesn't have to be any of that. Just enjoy it.
Oh, counterpoint. If Alabama wins this game, Jalen Milroe is the #1 pick in the draft, right?
No.
I'm kidding. I really like Jalen Milroe. I do think
I do
he's an
too.
NFL
I voted.
quarterback.
He was number 3 on my Heisman ballot last year. Number 3.
I really do think that if we live in a world where Malik Willis can win games in the NFL, Jalen Milroe can win games in the NFL. But yeah, I'm very excited for this game. I think that the one thing Georgia is lacking right now is that top level playmaking talent. And Alabama, in its boom or bust capacity, has a heck ton of playmaking talent. Will Georgia be able to keep up, or will Georgia's defense just stifle it and make it bust or bust? I'm really excited. I love watching Kirby Smart put good offenses in a blender. Like, I am so excited to look ahead to what Kirby's going to do against Tennessee. Like, gosh, a young quarterback against a Kirby Smart defense, that's really fun. Now you have Kalen DeBoer, who, gosh, his offense is really interesting. There's a lot of really exciting things that are happening. And if you guys are mostly NFL fans who are listening to this, you want to know what makes Kalen DeBoer's offense so exciting? Look at the 3-0 Seattle Seahawks, because it's a lot of similar principles. And there is a lot of intrigue to it. The defensive coordinator at Alabama, Kane Womack, might be a guy who's a P5 head coach before the season's over. He's great. Like, there's a lot to love about this game, not the least of which being the best safety prospect since Ed Reed. Like, it's just a lot of talent, a lot of exciting things to see in this game.
So I know you like very random, bizarre, like sitcom stuff. So I'm going to be the very random, bizarre college football name guy.
Sure.
Speaking of South Alabama, if you need a reason to tune in to the South Al LSU game this weekend, I got 2 for you. And Eddie asks, who is the best quarterback prospect this year? Jackson Dart, ? I'd prefer to replace Levis in 2026. Number 1, you got Carson Beck, Jalen Milroe, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Quinn Ewers, Drew Aller, Jackson Dart, Miller Moss, and I think Garrett Nussmeier will be a first-round pick. I think Garrett Nussmeier at LSU is going to be that guy. So if you want to watch, I don't think he's the top pick. I think he's like a late 30s pick.
Sure. Is Aller eligible? I thought he was a sophomore.
No, this is his second full season starting, and
okay.
he sat out. Aller's going to be one of those guys where the scouts get their hands on him, and they're going to go, look at all the skills. We can make this work. And he goes like early 3rd round, and then maybe doesn't do anything. But the point is I think it's a better draft class than people realize. That group of names is way better than the Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, Kenny Pickett draft class from a couple years ago. But here's the name for you. This is just for you, Nick. If you want to watch a player that will soon be in a Power 5 uniform, but is currently playing for South Alabama, his name is Fluff Mothwell.
Okay.
And you should just watch Fluff Mothwell for South Alabama. Fantastically fun player to watch. So just watch him. He'll soon be on an SEC roster.
I cannot begin to guess what position he plays with a name like Fluff Mothwell.
He's a running back, I think.
Okay.
But just a skill guy. Arkansas and Texas A&M is completely crazy all the time. Enjoy that one. Ole Miss will actually get tested for the first time, maybe, against Kentucky. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
The last time those two teams played, I believe Ole Miss just kept breaking Will Levis's toes. It was a strange one. But yeah, it was a really good game. These two teams, their last 2 times they've played each other have been 2 of the strangest games I ever covered. The COVID game, where there was like the 99-yard touchdown return that Ole Miss stripped out at the last second to save the game, and then won it in overtime. And then the
missed field goal or the missed extra point?
Missed extra point in overtime.
Yeah.
That was a strange one. It's a fun, not rivalry, but I think that Ole Miss is much better now than they were those last 2 times.
You were talking about sort of Kirby Smart. I think Mark Stoops' defense is very well suited to manage a pro-ish style college offense that wants to bully you like Georgia does. I don't know if that works against Lane Kiffin's angles, geometry, and tempo. I don't know if it works against Ole Miss this week. So Ole Miss still has not yet played a real football game. So
no, and you know who says that directly is Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, that's true. Oklahoma-Auburn. Look, Auburn. What are we doing? This is a home game. This is Oklahoma's first road game in the SEC ever. Both of them have major quarterback problems. I think you go back to the guys, Peyton Thorne and Jackson Arnold at quarterback. But either way, this is I can't believe I'm saying this. I take it back. I can, because I totally predicted this with Hugh Freeze. I just didn't predict it this fast, that it would unravel this fast, and that we are already talking about Well, if this goes south, does Auburn make a move after 2 years? And I can't. It's the most Auburn thing in the history of the world. I don't think they can afford to be in this situation, but man, it's bad on the Plains right now.
It's really bad, and I don't know if it's 2 years or 3 years, but start thinking about it.
You think so? All right.
Hugh's going to figure it out. He's really good at coaching football, but
I don't think so.
The personality thing never was a logical fit for me at Auburn.
I think Baby Billy fits too well at Auburn. That's my problem. I don't think this has always been my issue. Take the sliding into sexual assault victim DMs, take all the paddling students in high school and private rooms, like take all the off the field stuff that we know off the table and out of the equation. I never got why you take the risk on a coach who has never done more than like 9 wins. He loses to teams he's not supposed to routinely. That was back at Ole Miss. That's at Liberty. And it's now at Auburn. I don't understand. Like, you take the chance on Urban Meyer because you know Urban Meyer, sure, he might let a serial, domestic abuser on the coaching staff and put everyone in your community in danger, but he's going to at least win you a national championship. And that was never the case with Hugh Freeze. I don't understand that part of it. So it's happening faster than I expected is sort of my unexpected take on that.
Yeah, but again, the flip side is Gene Chiswick's track record when he got to Auburn was nothing. And then he won a national championship because Auburn built a really good team because they're Auburn. You think Hugh Freeze could figure it out, but you also, I don't know, like he revolutionized SEC football like few ever have. And then other coaches did it better.
Well, no, the NCAA just made all those things legal.
Yeah.
This is what happened. So here's the other thing. The only coach of the 16 coaches at SEC Media Day that was down at the bar after all the Media Day's events were done, you can guess which one it was, hanging out with the media, hanging out with us.
Billy Napier. No.
Yes, right. Guy likes to party, man. I just wish the fans probably want to see some of that energy from Billy Napier at some point. All right, here's my last final. I don't like predictions, but here's my last thing on Alabama, Georgia. I think Alabama plays extremely well in the first half. I think Kalen DeBoer is very good at designing an offense, and Jalen Milroe is extremely explosive. I don't think either team has shown us what they're going to do yet to date. I think we're going to learn a lot about what they want to be on offense. I still have questions about Georgia's down the field passing. You alluded to the weaponry. I think Alabama, the crowd, the defense, Jalen Milroe, Kalen DeBoer, they will have something for Georgia in the first half. They're up 13-7 at halftime. And Georgia figures stuff out at halftime, slowly just sits on them in the second half and suffocates the life out of them like Georgia want to do. And all of a sudden you look up and it's like, all right, punt. Okay, 75-yard drive for Georgia. All of a sudden the game's tied. Okay, turnover. Now they're up by 7. And now it's 21-13 and you lose the game. That's sort of where I'm at. Georgia coming off a bye week after being disrespected in the polls, dropping them to number 2 in the nation, playing their worst offensive game in 7 years, 8 years, 9 years under Kirby Smart. It's a bad spot, I think, for Alabama, but I like them to play well early and then Georgia to play well late. I don't know what that means for the final score.
I'll give you an over-under right here. It's 6.5 times my dad tries to fire Mike Bobo in game. What are you taking?
Does he have to say it out loud, or can it be a tweet? Can it be a post?
No, it will be out.
Can it be a text message?
Out loud. It will be a grown man wearing his homemade spiked shoulder pads.
Oh, seriously?
Sitting on his couch. He made them for the national championship game.
Is it text message then? Is it like,
no,
we got to get Bobo out of here?
No, this will just be him yelling at the TV.
How do you confirm? Are you going to be with him?
No, I just know it.
Okay.
I've watched a lot of football with him.
It's like low key in the time, whatever that what's that show?
The TVA or whatever it is.
TVA. Yeah, you can just feel a ripple in the time space continuum when your father tries to fire the offensive coordinator.
No, I can remember the name. My dad is a Dolphins fan thematically for this podcast, and I can remember the name of every Dolphins defensive coordinator of my lifetime just because of watching football with him. So
when Dan Marino was the quarterback.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
makes sense. Tracks.
Yeah, I'm setting it at 6.5. I'll report back to you guys next week, good or bad, for the Georgia offense.
There you go. All right. I want to take Bama. I really do. I want to take Bama on this. I don't know why, but I feel like they're the better team right now, and they're at home. And the Kirby Smart thing, I don't know. Don't. This is not a narrative game. It's just an enjoy it game. But we'll see about that. Tune into the Arkansas A&M game. That's going to be fantastic. It's always totally weird and bonkers. So make sure you watch that one as well. Especially if you're a Tennessee fan. You got Arkansas coming up in next week, and then Ole Miss getting challenged. Oklahoma and Auburn is a beautiful train wreck to watch. And Fluff Mothwell for South Al. Make sure you check out Old Fluff down there in Baton Rouge. Otherwise, we're not going to have a football show on Mondays. When they play on Monday nights, we do the show on Tuesdays, so we're not going to be on Monday, so make sure you check that out. Check out all the other great shows across the network. You got Hot Read podcast on Tuesdays and Fridays. You got Music City Audible on Mondays and Wednesdays. You got the Paul Kaharski podcast coming up this afternoon on his feed. You can also catch him on Monday night after the game, following every game from the press box. Make sure you read Nick Suss, of course, over at the Tennessean, Tennessean.com. Follow him on the Twitter machine at Nick Suss for those 6 tweets a week. You can get to me at Braden Gall. Is that it? I think I got everything. Go to Sinkers Beverages. Did I miss anything there, Nick? Anything else you want to promote, work on, where people can find you, what you're working on, etc.?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. As always, I can promote Flight of the Conchords. It hasn't been on the air in 15 years, but watch Flight of the Conchords. It's the best. It's over my shoulder. So I can't point. I'm so bad at this. There we go. Right there. Flight of the Conchords.
You're definitely one of the top 3 most beautiful women on the street, depending on the street. Yeah, that's it. Twitter at Nick Suss. Subscribe to the Tennessean, and I will give a TV recommendation every week from now on. Steve? What kind of gangster rap name is Steve anyway? I'm sorry. Everybody have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy the Saturday, enjoy the Sunday of action, enjoy the Monday night of action as well. Otherwise, for Nick, I'm Braden. Thanks for listening and watching. Share the show, rate, review, subscribe, all that great stuff. Thumbs up on YouTube. We do appreciate you guys. Have a great one. We will talk to you next week.